like, I don't know the lingo for it, but like complete a trick. That's not right. I dog-eared it, don't come for me. So this book is set in Louisiana. My voice just cracked. But I was so captured and riveted. Is captured the right word? And no. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to another book recommendation video. So today we're going to talk debuts, and today we are also going to talk about Book of the Month, who I am super excited to be partnering with on today's video. So before we dive into my inspiration for today's video, which is Stacy Willingham, whose debut came out last year with Book of the Month and whose newest book is one of this month's selections, let's talk about Book of the Month. So let's start with the best part. You can get your first book for only $5 this month using the code WONDER. Every month, Book of the Month's team curates a collection of 5 to 7 brand new hardcover books. All the genres, new and emerging voices, authors that you know and love, new releases, and early releases, which ding, 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 I think is the coolest part ever. It's totally risk-free, and like I said, $5 for your first book. If ever there were a time to get started with Book of the Month, this is it. So let's get into what I picked up this month. So like I said, I absolutely picked up the Stacy Willingham book. I did not even hesitate, literally screamed when I saw this on the list. And I had to have it. I completely fell in love with The Flicker in the Dark. I will read anything this woman writes. I love a thriller. She does great atmosphere. She does great characters. It was totally twisty. I just can't wait to see what she does next. So you guys know I'm not a TBR kind of a girl, but kind of consider this on my non-TBR TBR for December because I can't wait to read it. And then I also picked up Babel by R.F. Kuang. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, Audrey, you don't usually read fantasy. And you're right, I don't. But I've seen a lot of people reading this. I've seen a ton of people raving about this, which of course kicks in my FOMO and I feel like I need to know. But also I didn't realize that there's a dark academia vibe to this, which, buzzword, I absolutely needed to know what it was all about. So this is a lot of book. I'm gonna brave my way into it. The cover is absolutely stunning, and I really just feel like I need to know what everybody's talking about. So again, one of the coolest things about Book of the Month is you get to discover authors and books that maybe you normally wouldn't gravitate to, but puts it on your radar. So once again, I have all the links down in my description box so you can check out Book of the Month's website. First book for only $5 using the code WONDER. And I am super grateful again to Book of the Month for partnering with me on today's video, and I am also super excited to talk to you guys about some more debuts that I love. So in the spirit of Stacy Willingham, let's talk about her debut, A Flicker in the Dark. So this was a Book of the Month pick in December of 2021, and it was an early release, and I, once again, screamed when I found out about it. So this book, I mean, tell me there's a serial killer and I'm totally down for the book. Past and present timelines, mysteries in the past, mysteries in the present, bit of a reluctant return home vibe to it. It's like everything I want in a book. So in this one we meet Chloe, and 20 years ago a bunch of girls from her hometown had gone missing, and her father winds up confessing to being the one behind it. And as if that's not bad enough, we fast forward to the present tense. Chloe is trying to move on from her past, but girls start to go missing again, and the style is very similar to what happened many years ago, despite the fact that her father is in prison. So Chloe starts to look into what happened. She's dealing with things that are happening in the present tense, and I just loved this book. I went tab crazy on it and obsessively read it, and this was like, I read this and I was like, this is her debut book, but she's an auto-buy author for me. I will read anything she writes ever. And I just absolutely loved it. So this book is set in Louisiana, where I have never been, but I have to say the atmosphere and the writing in this makes me feel like I was there. And you could feel the swamp, and you could feel the heat, and you could feel the humidity, and you can just feel the woods and like everything around you in it. And I just thought she did an absolutely beautiful job with this book, and I, as you can tell, love it. Next up, I have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. So this was one of those books where I actually went to the bookstore, bought it, came home and read it immediately, which, like, what? I know. But I loved this book, and I heard the premise of it. A happily married couple, they've been together for 15 years. They have sort of that white picket fence, suburban, picture perfect town, one boy, one girl, everything is as it should be. And then for funsies, they are killers. They pick out a woman and they murder her, you know, for fun, to spice things up, to keep things interesting in their marriage. And as you can imagine, this causes some complications, maybe. maybe gonna cause a couple of problems. So I absolutely loved how completely dark and messed up this was. And I was just like, Samantha Downing is absolutely a writer for me. She does not disappoint in the dark and messed up in this. And this was definitely pitched as Dexter meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So understand the Dexter vibes, of course. And I think the Mr. and Mrs. Smith just comes from the couple part of it. This is not high octane thriller like that movie is, but it is definitely compulsive page turny kind of a thriller. So great. I definitely need to reread this one because it's been too long, but amazing. So a book that I read as part of a buddy read back in October with Amanda from The Curly Reader is 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Again, I'm doing a lot of hand today. So I didn't even realize this was a debut when I read it, and I think because I've heard her name so many times, but it is a debut, and it was really well done. So this was one of those books where when I read Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, so many people, I feel like in articles and in videos, were comping or kind of doing, if you like this, read that, to the 13th Tale. So I instantly snapped it up. I'll be honest, I didn't quite read what it was about, but I was like, oh, it's like Evelyn Hugo? Brilliant. So I didn't quite realize anything about this book, but the physical setup of the book and the structure of the book is very much like Evelyn Hugo. So Evelyn, you have world famous actress telling her life story to an unknown reporter. In 13th Tale, we have very famous writer telling her story to a somewhat unknown biographer. So it is kind of unclear when this book is actually set, and we do get past and present timelines. So we get, I don't know if it's like the present is like the 30s or the 40s. It's kind of vague. And then maybe, I don't know, late 1800s. If anybody knows, let me know. We talked about this when we did the kind of group Zoom after the buddy read. So it's a little bit unclear, but it's not really all that important when it is set. What's important is that it's really good. So we are following this woman, Vida Winter. She has been kind of historically reclusive, as some writers tend to be. We're such introverts. But she is famous for this collection of 12 enchanting stories. And when it originally came out, there was a 13th Tale, but then it kind of like disappeared. So Vida is finally ready to tell her story, and what a story it is. So I did not realize that this was a gothic, dark, secrets, lies, wow kind of mystery to this book. I really did not expect it. And when like the first creepy thing happened, I was like, Amanda, did you know? Because I didn't know, and now I like it even more. So it got me way more excited about the book. But I really was impressed with the dark and twistedness of this book. I really enjoyed the mystery. I enjoyed the stories. I had a whole bunch of guesses and I was wrong. I was super satisfied with the ending of this book. And I just thought it was so well done. And again, really took me by surprise in the sense that I, in my mind, was picturing like Evelyn Hugo 2.0, which is so silly because A, this came out earlier, B, this is a completely different book. But again, the structure of the book is very much like Evelyn, but I thought this was absolutely great. I did mostly audiobook for this, which was also really well done. There are a few parts of this book that have a little bit of a slowness to it. It is definitely a slow burn of a book, but the payoff is well worth it. The next book I have is The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. So my copy is actually boxed up with probably 100 other books because I'm in the process of trying to deal with my shelves. So I read this last year when it came out and I totally enjoyed this book. So I do feel like this book is sort of mispitched as a thriller in the sense that it is not a fast-paced kind of a book, but it is, I would say, sort of a slow burn mystery horror is how I would kind of describe this book. So this is set in the publishing industry and we are following a 26-year-old editorial assistant named Nella, and she is tired of being the only black employee at Wagner. So when the other black girl, Hazel, gets hired, Nella is so excited to have kind of a partner in crime, have someone she can talk to not feel that she's like alone in this publishing industry. But then as much as her and Hazel are getting along at the start, there's a little bit of a rub that happens, and then Nella starts getting these super weird notes that tell her to get out of there. So this is one of those books where for a lot of the book, I was like, what is going on? Because we get some multiple point of views. We get some past and present timelines. There is definitely an air of confusion, which does make sense and does resolve itself. But when I went into this book, I was expecting straight up thriller, and the style of the book and how it was structured was so much more unique than I was expecting, and so much different than sort of a traditional thriller. But I really enjoyed this book. So the writer side of me lives for the publishing industry side of things. Zakiya Dalila Harris herself actually worked in publishing, so there's like such a level of authenticity to the look and feel of it, to the intricacies, kind of the behind the curtain of what goes on in publishing. And I just was so blown away by this book. The writing was absolutely great. This is going to get turned into, or this is actually in the process of getting turned into a TV show, which I'm like a multi-part show, which I'm really excited about. And I just thought it was great. So I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. I will definitely be reading more from her, but I absolutely loved this. It's funny, like sometimes I don't like being unsettled in a book of like not knowing what's going on, but I feel like a few of the books I've read in this past year or so have had that feeling where like you don't feel like you're standing on steady ground, you don't know everything, you're really in the dark about a lot of things. And actually a book that I recently read, I thought I knew what was going on, and then there was a moment that like shifted everything I thought I knew, and I was like, what? And then I was like, yes. So I just love it when that happens. So definitely recommend this one. Another book that would be perfect for this time of year, like especially if you're in a wintry area like I am, is Shiver by Reynolds. This is set in the French Alps. This is her homage to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is isolated on a mountain, and someone seems to be out for some revenge. So we are following a group of 5 friends who are snowboarders who 10 years ago, they all trained together, Olympic hopefuls, like top of their career, sponsorships, the whole nine. And they used to be a group of 6, and one of the people in their group disappeared that winter 10 years ago when they were all training together. So now they are brought back together under what they think is a certain circumstance, but it turns out in an And Then There Were None vibe, they are brought there under a completely different circumstance than they originally believed. And it's just maybe not gonna end well for them. So we wind up seeing 10 years ago, we wind up seeing the present, and I loved it. I loved, again, the development of the relationships between everyone, seeing the evolution of their relationships in the past and trying to understand the dynamic of them in the present. This is a book that also has an element of romance in it, which is definitely not something I need in a thriller. And more often than not, I prefer not to have it in a thriller, but this has a great romantic thread through it that I thought was so beautifully well done, was completely naturally woven into the story. And similarly, another brilliant debut, Hello Transcriber by Hannah Morrissey, also has a romantic thread through it that, again, I don't need to have in a book, but it just completely worked in that book and was also so well done. So there's another bonus debut for you. But I loved Shiver so much, and I just loved her writing. I read this one in like 2 days last year, or earlier this year. Sorry, I read it in January, and I just absolutely loved it. So great atmosphere, great wintry vibes, great friends to frenemies, just loved it. Another book I read earlier this year is The Night She Went Missing by Kirsten Bird, and this is also set in Texas. I feel like I have a couple Texas books in this haul. So we are following this tight-knit community in Texas, and it says, where parents are known to behave badly and people are not always who they appear to be. I just love people behaving badly. So in this one, we have Emily. She is a popular but bookish prep school senior, and she goes missing after a night out with her friends. And she was last seen leaving a party with Alex, who is a football player. He has a bit of a dubious reputation, but no one in the friend circle is talking about what happened. So we follow 3 mothers. We follow Emily's mom, we follow Alex's mom, and then we follow another mom in the group. And we see how Emily's disappearance, how sort of eyes turning to Alex, how it fractures the friendship, how it fractures the town. And I just thought this was really well done. This was another one where it had me guessing. I love the conflict between the women. I love a little bit of bad behavior going on here. And I loved how sort of I almost said something, which I'm not gonna say. I love how the book came together, and I love the reveal of this book. So I really enjoyed her writing. She has another book coming out early in 2023. I'll include it down below. And I'm excited to read more from her. So I definitely felt the atmosphere of this. Again, I feel like so many of these authors just paint such beautiful atmosphere, and I was hooked. I was hooked by the story. I was hooked by the what is going on here, and I will definitely be reading more from Kristen Bird. So another book in the I did not see this coming category is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. And I say I didn't see it coming because this book 1000% was not even on my radar, because my radar is basically like thriller. And I was listening to a podcast with Ashley Winstead. If you haven't read In My Dreams I Held a Knife, another brilliant debut. But I will basically do anything she tells me to do. And she was talking about how her thriller coming out in 2023 is Every Summer After with serial killers. And I was like, what is this book that she's talking about? And I looked it up and I was like, let me go check it out. So I also trotted out to the bookstore and I picked it up and I was like, this is some romance. This is not my usual go-to, although it kind of is becoming more of a go-to for me this year, and I loved it. So this is very, I would say, Emily Henry, Christina Lauren, Abby Jimenez vibes. It is smart, it is witty, it is funny. There's a lot of emotion to this. There are some weightier topics to it, and there's a little bit of mystery in the sense that we have a past and present timeline in this. Our main character, Percy, her family had a summer home outside of Toronto, and she became fast friends with the boys who lived next door, Sam and Charlie, and with their mom, who was a single mom raising them. But we know that she has not been back there in 10 years. Percy has not been back there in 10 years because something happened. And she winds up getting a call from Charlie that his mom has passed away, and tells Percy, because he knows that she would want to come up for the funeral, despite whatever tension or uncomfortableness that might lead to. That's a lot of hand. So we wind up seeing the course of 6 summers and then sort of her one weekend that she's returned to find out what happened, to finally understand the relationship between these people. And I loved it. I loved the development of the relationship in the past. I liked watching it in the present, not quite sure sort of where the fallout was, but also see them together for the first time. So I just thought it was really well done. I dog-eared this one to pieces. I can't wait to read her next book, but I was surprised at how much I loved this. A little bit steamy, definitely some emotions in this, and I loved it. I cried, like I was laughing, I was cheering. Like this is one of those books that, like I said, didn't see it coming, so glad I read it. Another book I read a couple of years ago is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinka Braithwaite. And this is like one of those, don't be fooled by the fact that this is a small book, because it packs such a massive punch. I loved this. So as I said earlier in the video, give me a book about serial killers and I'm completely there for it. So this is about 2 sisters. One of them kind of seems to be a serial killer. So in this one we are following 2 Nigerian sisters, and Korede is the older sister, and her younger sister, Ayoola, anytime kind of things seem to go wrong with her boyfriends, they wind up dead. And Korede, being the amazing sister that she is, she kind of helps her sister clean up the mess. But there's certainly a little bit of a level of denial of what's going on here, but also a level of completely knowing what her sister is up to, even though her sister is kind of like, just sort of happened accidentally, help me out. So everything is sort of okay until Ayoola comes to visit Korede at work. Korede is a nurse who is harboring a massive crush on one of the doctors that she works with, and he takes a liking to Korede's sister, who, as we know, has a knack for killing her boyfriends. So Korede is put in this position of trying to decide how to handle her sister, being afraid for this man that she has a crush on, that she works with, and what to do next. So there's definitely some very dark humor in this, but this also was one of those books that had a real emotional impact for me when it came to talking about the family and the relationship with the sisters and sort of their history. And I was expecting a thriller from this, and I was not expecting such an emotional pull from this book as I had, and I really enjoyed it. So this is another one that I want to read again because it's been a couple years, but I just thought it was really well done, really clever, and I just loved the premise of it. Like, what would you do if your sister was a serial killer? What would what you do. But I just thought it was very interesting, very well done. Another book with tremendous atmosphere where you could feel the heat, you could feel the environment, and I just thought it was like beautifully written in that way as well, where you really felt like you were there. So another great one to pick up. So another book that definitely like checked all my buzzword boxes was Every Last Fear by Alex Finley. I loved this book. We get a true crime TV show, we get a past and present mystery, and we are following a college student who is trying to figure out what happened to his family. So this was one of those books that has one of those best first line ever kind of a thing. And it says they found the bodies on a Tuesday. So we have a family, the Pine family. So Matt is a student at NYU and he gets a phone call from the police because his family was down in Mexico on vacation, and he gets the call that they have all died, apparently from a gas leak. It looks like an accident, but unfortunately the Pine family has some troubled history, and Matt is not wholly convinced that there wasn't something more sinister going on. So Matt's older brother Danny is currently serving a life sentence for murdering his girlfriend, and this true crime TV show, which caught on and which believes that Danny is innocent, has obviously caused a lot of a stir. So Matt is forced to confront the past, try and figure out what happened in the present, and also confront the fact that his only living relative now is his older brother who is in prison. So this book definitely had me doing all the twists and turns. I really enjoyed it. I love anything true crime. I love multiple points of view. I love past and present timelines. And I just thought this was absolutely spectacular. So I do realize that Alex Finley is a pen name, and this technically is not his debut, but it's his debut as Alex Finley, so we're gonna go for it. Another book that gave me all the dark and messed up people vibes is The Escape Room by Megan Golden. I just loved how deliciously unlikable so many of the characters in this book are. This follows a group of people who work down on Wall Street, and they are just as unlikable as you can possibly imagine. But when the book opens, they are lured to what they believe is this company event and this ridiculous escape room. They are all in an elevator in an abandoned building. And they quickly find out that this is no game, that they have been brought there, and that they do need to try to escape to survive. So we wind up getting past and present timelines to find out what could have possibly led to someone wanting to kill these 4 people, although I feel like 5 minutes in an elevator with them and you would want to kill them too because they're that terrible. But I just loved it. I love the twists and turns. I don't know. I just love people behaving badly so much. And I thought this was outstanding. I was completely here for it. I was completely here for the messed upness of it all. And it just completely turned me on to Megan Golden as an author, and I haven't looked back. A book that gave me all the creepy feelings in all the best way is The Brightlands by John Fram. So when I first read this book, I listened to it on audio, and then I subsequently picked it up because I had to have it. The audiobook of this is tremendous because there is one element of complete creeptasticness that plays literally so well on audio that if you are into audiobooks, I would recommend it. But if you're not an audiobook person, by all means, read this book because it's absolutely outstanding. So in this book, we are following Joel, who left this terrible town of Bentley 10 years ago, and he was essentially shamed out of town for being gay. And now he is living in New York, he's doing great, and he winds up getting a call from his younger brother one night, and Dylan just doesn't sound right. So Joel goes home to visit, kind of to check in on him, and while Joel is home, Dylan winds up going missing. And Joel is forced to sort of confront this town, confront the people from his past, and work with some of them to try and find out what happened to his younger brother. So this book explores so many different levels and layers, and it has such interesting commentary on toxic masculinity, on the small-mindedness of this town, of sort of that group think and all the terrible things that can come of it. And we start to see just this completely messed up view that this town has. I don't want to say much of anything because I do really feel like, as with most thrillers, it's best to go in blind. But I was so captured and riveted. Is captured the right word? This book captured my attention, but I was so riveted by the writing, by the characters, by the deep emotion in this book. Like, again, I was expecting a little bit horror thriller. I did not expect such an emotional response to this book. And I just was like blown away by the way it twisted and turned, how everything was woven together. And again, that creepy spookiness was so perfectly on point. I just loved it. This is another one that I need to read, and I want to physically read it the next time so I can tab it up, because oddly this book is in pristine condition, but it's because I did the audiobook of it. But I just loved it so much, and I think it's just so well written, and it was just so dark and messed up. And I kind of thought it was going to be like this Friday Night Lights kind of football in Texas type of a thing, but there is such an overarching darkness to this book that is so beautifully well done. I just loved it. I keep saying that with every book, but it's true, I did. Another book that incorporates that reluctant return home and having to confront your small-minded town. I just finished, I haven't even talked about it on the channel yet, and it's Jackal by Erin E. Adams. This book, again, I knew it was a little bit horror. I know that that encompasses a whole lot of things. I knew there was a little bit of thriller vibe to this, but this was another book that really, I feel like anytime, like I'm always here for the entertainment factor. I'm always here for a bit of a popcorn thriller. But when an author in a story can really weave in so many different layers and so many different messages and become so thought-provoking, I find it just such an elevated experience in reading. And this is one of those books where I really feel like a lot gets given away in there, and maybe best served a little bit dark going into this one as well. So in this one, we are following a woman named Liz Roche, and she is making the reluctant return home to her tiny town in Pennsylvania because her best friend, Mel, is getting married. So Mel has been in a long-term relationship. She has a child with her boyfriend. They are now finally getting married, and Liz is coming home for it. And she has some really not so fond memories of this town. So she was one of only 2 black girls in her class, and the other girl in her class wound up going missing after a party one night in the woods. She went off with an older man. She was found several days later, like ready to cringe, with her chest cavity ripped open and her heart missing. And the case was never solved. So when we are here in the present day at the wedding, at the reception, the daughter of the bride and groom, who Liz was watching, winds up going missing, and the only evidence they find is a piece of her torn dress covered in blood in the woods. And Liz is committed to finding out what happened to Caroline, who was the girl who went missing. And as she starts to research, she realizes that Keisha, the girl she went to high school with, was not the first girl to go missing, and clearly is not going to be the last, it appears, unless Liz figures out what's going on. So we get such great mystery in this, so many great suspects in this, so many great questions of what the heck is going on here. And I just thought it was so beautifully well done. Another one with great atmosphere to it. Definitely a couple cringy moments that I was not totally, I just seem to always be eating when I read the cringe moments. But definitely some very evocatively written cringe moments. But I really enjoyed the characters in this. I did not know what was going on, and I do think going in on the blind side is definitely a way to go, and I just loved it. So I will keep on talking about this one. I just finished it, as I said, and another great debut. I picked this up, if you guys saw my video when Sarah and I went to the Strand earlier in October, and I picked it up and I just loved it. So anyway, none of that has anything to do with anything, but it also was a stunning cover. So I do try to switch up what I talk about, but I also feel like I would be remiss if I didn't talk about In the Woods by Tana French, which I've talked about a lot lately, I know, but I just love it so much. And I reread this book this year. I originally read it like 10 plus years ago, and I feel like the reread of it reminded me of just what an absolutely amazing author she is. It absolutely flipped my switch on wanting to read more of her. I did read book 2 in the series, and I feel like I need to talk more about these books. So the beauty of the Dublin Murder Squad series, this is the first in the series, is each book focuses on a different detective, but other detectives, from what I can tell so far, that appear in the book do appear as maybe secondary characters. And I am told you can read them in any order. I'm going to be a purist and I'm going to read it start to finish, because a character from book 1 takes the lead in book 2. A character who is secondary but I feel like important in book 2 will take the lead in book 3. So I definitely enjoy seeing the evolution of the characters, but you can also just read In the Woods and be one and done if that's what you want to do. So In this book, we are following past and present mysteries. It is obviously police procedural because we are following the Dublin Murder Squad. But the beauty of these books, in my opinion, is that we get a police investigation, we get very in-depth cases, but it is also a slow burn, I feel like, character study. The language is absolutely beautiful. The atmosphere is absolutely perfect. And I love seeing the relationship and the dynamics between the characters. So in this book, we are following two detectives, Rob Ryan and Cassie Maddox. They are partners, and they are called to a murder site in the woods. So a young girl was found murdered. And the hitch is that 20 years ago, 3 kids went into those woods and only one of them came out. He has no memory of what happened to his best friends. He was kind of all banged up. His shoes are full of blood. They never solved the case, and people are starting to wonder if these 2 cases are connected. So we get to see such an interesting exploration of this small town who was impacted all those years ago by this heinous crime, and now we have a new crime on their doorstep. And the connections between the police officers, the connections between Ryan and Maddox, I think is so well done. And I think kind of these partners who are sort of the best and worst for each other and kind of bring out the best and worst in each other, I think is such an interesting dynamic, and I just loved it. And there's just so many layers to this. I did a combination of audiobook and physically reading it. I did some tabbing of this. I did the same with the likeness. And I just think these are such a unique book and such a unique style. So I just love a book that gives you more than maybe what you were expecting. And I also feel like as I'm reading this Patricia Cornwell series, I'm also seeing those evolution of the characters and the relationships. And I feel like Tana French just accomplishes so much in those relationships in this one book, and it's just so well done. So had to talk about it one more time. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you again to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. I'm just so grateful for our partnership, and for all of you guys, definitely check out their link down below. $5, use the code WONDER. It's a great way to get your first book. And I would also love to hear what your favorite debut is. I had a list like long, and hopefully I pointed out a couple new ones to you, or maybe turned you on to a book that you were curious about. But I would love to know what your favorite debuts are, because I just get like over the moon when I get to discover a new writer kind of at the beginning, like I did with Jackal with a book that just came out, or being able to discover a debut of someone who has a whole bunch of books out that we get to dive into. So cheers for all of that. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in another video really soon. Take care, everybody.